Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Will Oscar Rivas be the man to end Dillian Whyte'S unbeaten run since losing his first fight in December 2015? Whyte has won 9 straight, and he is looking to add another notch to his belt in the form of Oscar Rivas at the O2 in London this weekend. This fight has been confirmed for the WBC Interim Heavyweight Championship, and also the WBC Mandatory Challenger will be confirmed through the winner of this fight. So eventually the winner will face the full WBC champion at a point yet to be confirmed. However, it looks like Deontay Wilder will have his fight against Luis Ortiz. Should he get through that, he will face Tyson Fury early in 2020, with the winner set to face Oscar Rivas or Dillian Whyte. So there's at least a couple of fight wait, but there is something on the line for this fight, and it is a very good fight, a significant fight in the heavyweight division. Dillian Whyte regarded firmly within the top 10. Oscar Rivas generally considered somewhere between 10 and 15. He's a top 15 fighter, we can say that much. So two very high caliber fighters squaring off in London in a pay-per-view event which is eagerly anticipated by many, but it's in some ways had a very sedate build-up. Hasn't quite been the sort of hype and buzz for this fight that I thought there would be in recent weeks, in the final weeks ahead of this fight on July 20 at the O2. Pretty decent undercard. You've got some competitive heavyweight fights and a few other fighters who are on the bill, Richard Riakporhe being one. So for me, the lack of buzz has been a little bit strange given the caliber of the card and the main event, even though I did see one website, mainstream website, suggest that this wasn't a competitive fight and it was a terrible card, and I've got to completely disagree with those sentiments. This is one of the best heavyweight cards in 2019. It is. It's just far and away one of the best cards so far. We just had a good card last week with Daniel Dubois beating Nathan Gorman, Joe Joyce and Bryant Jennings on that undercard. It's been a pretty good July so far, and there's a few other fights to look forward to at the end of the month. But this weekend, Dillian Whyte and Oscar Rivas, I have to say I've been warming up to the idea, not because I don't like Dillian Whyte or anything like that, that Oscar Rivas could actually win this fight. It is pretty much a 50-50 on paper, for me at least. I know that there will be some who will favour Whyte, maybe 60-40 or 70-30. I've just been thinking about some of the variables with this fight, and I do believe that Oscar Rivas, he has a hell of a shot to win this fight against Dillian Whyte. Let's not get it confused. Dillian Whyte is a very, very good fighter, but he's also vulnerable. He is beatable. We have seen in recent fights with the likes of Derek Chisora, Joseph Parker, that he, is vulnerable and that there are weaknesses to be exploited. I mean, Joseph Parker almost had Whyte out of there in the 12th round of their fight. Whyte held on to win, and Derek Chisora was winning on 2 cards before he was knocked out in the 11th by a left hook from Dillian Whyte. That was a fight where Derek Chisora looked pretty good. Dillian Whyte looked actually decidedly average at points in that fight. And Oscar Rivas, in the opponent that Whyte is facing, he's an unbeaten Colombian. He's currently 26-0. He's coming off a career best win. His coming out party in the heavyweight division was in January against Bryant Jennings, knocking out Jennings in the final round of their fight in the United States. That was the sort of announcing himself to the heavyweight division moment for Oscar Rivas, because prior to then he'd had some bad luck in his career with medical issues. Specifically, he couldn't pass the eye exam in the United States. He'd had fights with Gerald Washington, Amir Mansour canned because he couldn't pass the medical. So now he's announced himself through that Bryant Jennings fight, so I guess we can maybe put to bed that there's any issues with his eye, or at least they're manageable. And now he's stepping into an even bigger fight with Dillian Whyte. He's kind of been a bit of an under-the-radar fighter within the heavyweight division, largely because of some of those issues that I just outlined, but he does have pedigree. He might be a smaller heavyweight at 6 foot and half an inch, but actually he does have good amateur pedigree. He's got a good background, wins over the likes of Andy Ruiz Jr. and Kubrat Pulev in the amateurs. He is a guy that Pulev has said that he must face as a professional and get his revenge. Beat him in 2008. Also, Andy Ruiz Jr. beat him that same year. This is around the Olympics. And Oscar Rivas, we can't forget, he is an Olympian. So his career as a pro might have had a few twists and turns and maybe not panned out as quickly as he might have liked in terms of coming to the top of the division. But he's making some noise now, and he can continue to do that in this fight. And with the mandatory for the WBC title being on the line and an interim title, this is all upside for Oscar Rivas. Effectively, he's been plucked out of, I don't want to say obscurity, but he's been chosen by Dillian Whyte to face him for this pay-per-view event. And in the process, he's fighting for an interim title in the WBC mandatory. He is further down the WBC top 15 at the moment. So the fact that he can contest for that position, that honor, as well as fighting for an interim title, it's all coming up Oscar Rivas. And the reason I believe that this is a 50-50 fight to a large extent is because Oscar Rivas is a very good boxer. He is, I believe, a better version of Derek Chisora. He will bring pressure. He will be able to control Dillian Whyte to some extent behind his jab with his boxing, whereas Whyte can often look a little bit sloppy. He can look a little bit wild in there. And sure, he's got that great left hook, but ahead of that landing, he might actually find himself in the position here with Oscar Rivas where he's down on the cards, where he could potentially be losing rounds. So I believe that Oscar Rivas has a very good chance of winning this fight. I think Rivas will start strong. He will probably win some of those opening rounds. It remains to be seen about his gas tank, though. Will he be able to, because he's a very muscular guy at 6 foot and being roughly 230 to 240 pounds, there or thereabouts, between, for his most recent sort of half a dozen fights. That is still, 230 to 240. That's pretty big for a guy who was that short. I don't want to say short, but, for a heavyweight of that stature. He really does have quite a bit of muscle mass. And we did see against Bryant Jennings when he was fighting him that he was actively conserving energy. He was trying to be as efficient as he could in that fight with Jennings, not to, use too much and waste too much energy. And ultimately that proved something in his favor because he was able to really unload the tank in that final round and knock out Jennings to come away with that win. He was actually up on the cards in that fight heading into the 12th round, but that had been a very competitive fight, and I could see a fight between Rivas and Whyte being similarly competitive, where both will have spots of success, but potentially Rivas could be winning on the cards throughout the fight. It just could be a case where even though Whyte is the taller guy, Rivas might be able to really make some inroads with his pressure, using his jab, slipping punches, and trying to really just outwork Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte is not one of these guys, and actually neither is Oscar Rivas to an extent. They aren't workhorses in terms of the volume that they throw. They aren't like a Joe Joyce, letting their hands go for most of each and every round for 3 minutes. They are guys who will work in spots, and I think Oscar Rivas, behind the back of his slicker boxing, will be able to, in the boxing stakes, potentially have an edge over Dillian Whyte. Hopefully Whyte will be able to use his reach. He does have a slightly longer reach than Oscar Rivas, about 1.5 inches, but at this level, that may not actually really be a factor. If it was 5 inches, like it was for Gorman and Dubois, it might be more of a factor, but 76.5-inch reach as opposed to Whyte's 78-inch reach. I think it will come down to, if it's just a straight boxing match, Rivas may have the edge. But we know Dillian Whyte will like to rough up Rivas at different points in this fight, as he did to Joseph Parker. And arguably, his physicality in that fight, it did actually sort of put Parker off, and it was an advantage for Dillian Whyte using those roughhouse tactics. So I think Oscar Rivas will be aware of Dillian Whyte and some of those tactics, but how will he respond? Will he be able to fight fire with fire? Will he be able to really try to out-muscle Dillian Whyte? Whyte probably will be the heavier guy by about 5 to 10 pounds, so it remains to be seen what will happen there in terms of using, Whyte in his physicality. But I do think we will see Dillian Whyte in this fight working off the back foot, similar to Bryant Jennings against Oscar Rivas, I think, and similar to also Whyte against Derek Chisora at the rematch. I don't think that Dillian Whyte is going to opt to just trade with Oscar Rivas early on. I think he will be utilising movement, and he will be looking to stay clear of Oscar Rivas and his power punches in the early part of the fight, because that's when Rivas is at his most dangerous. And before that Bryant Jennings knockout, Oscar Rivas had never scored a knockout past the midway point of a fight. So that went against the grain, but he proved Rivas that he can still carry his power. But obviously, while he's fresh, and you can see here on screen Rivas working the heavy bag, and this isn't slowed down, so very explosive and powerful puncher. And Whyte will be cautious, I'm sure, early on. I think Whyte will ease his way into the fight. But can Oscar Rivas do it? Can he stay away from Dillian Whyte's left hook? There's an argument to say that Oscar Rivas might be susceptible to that left hook, but ultimately we're going to see on the night. But this is a very good fight. I believe that Oscar Rivas does have a shot in this fight. Very well and truly has a good shot. I think he can win this one, and some of this will come down to execution. Who performs on the night? Because they are both good fighters. They both do have the tools to win, and they can both win by knockout. Similarly, I think, Dillian Whyte, if he put on a more concerted effort, worked behind the jab, he might be able to box to a points decision. But if it just went to points, I think I would favour Rivas, because I do believe he's the better boxer, he's the better technician. But certainly Dillian Whyte, with his power, that left hook in particular, he may trouble Rivas. So I find this one very hard to pick. But Rivas, if he wins this, he's golden. He has a title shot wrapped up for the WBC mandatory, and he has an interim title. This would really be, not from rags to riches, but, I want to come up with a similar analogy, but you know what I mean. It's kind of that thing. 2019 would certainly be his breakout year, from almost obscurity, being a fringe contender, to becoming a contender after the Bryant Jennings fight with that win, and then potentially winning a title against Dillian Whyte in the mandatory position. That really would represent a fantastic year for Rivas. What do you make of it all? What do you make of Oscar Rivas and his chances against Dillian Whyte? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.